they talk, Laura?
I am, have asked Terry and Diana to speak so I know if they can. Talk.
Good morning, testing. I mean, afternoon, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Terry.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, everyone.
Mr. Beal?
Jim, are you there? Mike shows that it's off.
Okay, he should be able to speak now.
Mute. Yeah.
He's unmuted.
Here's he. Hey. Sir.
That's funny.
Okay. Can you hear me? We can hear you. Good, thank you.
Oh, can we?
Right. Think through loud and clear.
Thanks.
5:30.
I have got 5:30 on the clock.
We go ahead and get started. We have everybody, the committee 100% here and board 100% here with Mr. Beal attending virtually. We all have an agenda. The motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Move. Second. All in favor? Okay, that's done. Secretary, do we have any public speakers signed up?
No.
No. Okay. Skip that part of it. Our consent agenda consists solely of minutes from the meeting, which I'm sure we all remember the details of March 27th. Motion to approve the consent agenda, which is solely the minutes.
So moved.
Moved. Second. Favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have no unfinished business. And we have new business. I should note that there are, it's an addendum on the back of these, what was, or a second page, and how your paperwork is set up. That have additional notes, really kind of a subpart of the new business. And the Mr. Hill and I had a conversation. We thought, given the interest expressed in the conversation at our last meeting, about setting up session for the purposes of discussing affordability assistance program. And I think the intent is to reach any, we're going to go do this tonight, but rather this is kind of, I think, going to be a journey to which we have a lot of expertise. If we decide we want to take the journey, it's going to be board work, it's going to be staff work as well. That this is a journey we want to take with decisions about ultimately doing or not doing somewhere down the road.
I'd like to, Mark, I want to thank you for really hosting this meeting, right? This is an opportunity for the board to come together and really talk and learn from each other. I mean, we're lucky because the board has a lot of expertise around the table. By the way, a lot of expertise on this issue around the table. So an opportunity to learn from each other. But first, why are we talking about this in the first place? I think if you live in Alexandria, and you all do, our city is wrestling with the cost of living in this town and is looking at a variety of things to make housing more affordable. Clearly, utilities are a part of that expense. So I think as leaders in the city, we also have to look at our fees and ask ourselves, you know, how does that contribute or not contribute to the affordability in the city? And I agree with Mark, we're not going to come up with an answer today, but at least we'll learn from each other and maybe narrow scope a bit. I also think there may be things we could start soon to move in a certain direction. So a great opportunity to learn from each other. So that's what today is all about. Back to you, Mark.
I would add that in addition to the issue of just the city getting more expensive, I think that this city and any number of jurisdictions have been going through in kind of how things get paid for, whether it's tax structures, whether it's fees for service, whether it's late fines like libraries that our libraries eliminated, or whether it's bus fares that the city eliminated and Dash eliminated the Dash bus fares 2 or 3 years ago. So there has been a kind of a total reexamination going on in this city and in many other places in regards to what the structure of what charges and fees and taxes are and should be, and what's fair and equitable for the population and community. And clearly, as we know, that utilities haven't been traditionally part of that discussion as a broad class of organizations, fee for service, but that has started to change, as pointed out in Ms. Hammer's memo and some of the other information we've had. There are some jurisdictions that have taken steps to change their fee structure. And the question is, do we want to take steps to explore that? And given how broad the issue is and how the possible ways to go about, some of which are not mutually exclusive, interpreting what are useful come out is interpreting kind of general priorities of things to look at, so that time going forward is kind of focused and is efficient in the sense of working on things and looking at things that are have some interest on part of this board. That I'll put it to anybody else who'd like to kind of add, kind of kick off from this discussion process, which we're going through this.
It's always good to start with what is the outcome we're trying to achieve, right? That's always in any policy discussion. What is the public outcome we're trying to achieve? Who wants to jump in?
I feel like I'm in class. Also, it does not help that you all are over there and I'm the only one.
I'm going to sit over there.
No, it's
I think we're trying to achieve sustainable funding to maintain operations and our requirements while still, while not overburdening those who can't really take any more burden on.
I mean, if we're thinking about trying to achieve affordable service for all people in the city, well, all of our customers. Kind of like in the community of practice around water and sewer affordability. Affordability is generally considered like the ability to pay for service, while also being able to meet other essential needs. And there's a few commonly accepted benchmarks for what percentage of a household's income can be going towards water and sewer service before it's considered to be unaffordable. Anywhere in the 4 to 5% range for water and sewer combined seems to be like, I mean, it's kind of evolving, but that seems to be where both EPA and community advocates are kind of landing is once you exceed that threshold, your service is considered to be unaffordable.
Did you say 4 to 5% of water and sewer, so drinking water?
That'd be combined. Yeah, water, drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater, if there is such a fee. Yeah.
That's 4 to 5% of your household income.
Sometimes when like folks are looking at like just wastewater, just drinking water, they'll use like 2 or 2.5% of household income as a metric. So I think that's, I mean, but it's a value judgment, right? So I think we can consider that a data point, but we don't need to feel bound to it. I think we would want to look at what are the cost burdens of like the lowest income residents in Alexandria. Like there have been a lot of studies that look, broader, like nationally, but we need to know what's happening here.
I'm a little bit concerned that we focus too much on the lowest income. I think as the last meeting, we looked at those folks who don't fall within the lowest income, but are still burdened. I know lots of people I work with who are struggling and they make well above sort of the lowest, but childcare, different other things, just the cost of living in this area.
That's definitely true, but it's just like if you're paying 1% of your income for water and sewer, that's generally considered to be affordable within, just discussions around the issue.
Well, maybe we don't capture it in what's affordable and what's not affordable, but maybe those folks can be captured in a different program where the metric is something different.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that, so we have limited resources to work with, and I don't think we need to be helping people who make over $100,000 a year, just to be like completely frank. I mean, that's not to say that it's an insignificant expense for them, but we're trying to make sure that people can afford to pay for service while also like paying for food and medicine, and pay rent or their mortgage. And once you get past a certain level of income, it's just not as much of a burden. And so, who should we be focusing on to help? I mean, like the median income in Alexandria is around 105,000 thereabouts. So it's like thinking about the pie chart that we saw last month that showed like for a family of 4 making that amount, it was like 107, I think. And it showed that water and sewer was about 1%. Like, well, there are 50% of households that are making less than that. So that's a lot of households, and we can't help like all of those households. So, well, let me stop rambling.
Well, I know in the industry, there's a distinction between assistance programs and affordability.
Correct, yes.
Affordability, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is where you look at water and sewer expenses as a percent of income. Assistance is much broader than that. It's just providing some kind of help to those who need it with of course, a consideration of income, but not setting a benchmark. And I know we have had a water fund for a while. So just, I'm leaning more, I'll put my bias out there. Much more comfortable with assistance programs to start until we really understand the problem in the subpopulation first, before we wade into the affordability discussion, because I just think benchmark is a hard thing to apply when we are only one part of a water bill. Remember, we are only one half of the water bill paid by households in the city. About one half, a little bit more. So I think affordability is probably a tough policy to implement, a tough program to implement.
Well, but the goal of an assistance program is to help people afford
Right.
their bills. So like, yes, there is a distinction between those two types of programs, but the end goal is the same, right? And if you adopt an assistance program, you still need to have a goal and eligibility metrics, you know, who's gonna qualify for assistance. Like all public assistance programs work that way, right?
Might be a good time at this point, by the way, very valid points, to maybe discuss what was our experience with the water fund. I know we operated it through United Way, was that? Correct. And I think we stopped pre-COVID, I think. But what was our experience with water fund?
So the water fund was started in 2015, funded primarily through donations. United Way was the 501c3, so Alex Renew did not take in that additional income for donations. My understanding in digging into this a bit further is there was a total of $6,300 in the water fund. And that fund was not distributed. So it's still sitting there in an account waiting for a 501(c)(3) for distribution. It was either, the term was not distributed, but minimally to not distributed is where the water fund went. So it got created, the 501(c)(3) through United Way, and then United Way didn't want to support the water fund any longer as a 501(c)(3). Therefore, it folded in 2020 and got revived during our initial conversations in February of this year.
So what was the span of time that you raised 6,300?
I don't know how long it took to get the funds in there, but it was established in 2015. I think most of it was donations, but I don't think it was still accepting funds over those 4 years.
Do you know if it was heavily advertised?
I don't. Yeah. When I started here and 2 years into it, the first time I've heard of it internally was when we were putting together the RFP documents for the tunnel project to help a donation program through the contractor. And around that same time is when United Way backed out. So I don't think it was in service for more than really, they were starting to, I think the former board member, when Ms. Turner departed, I think that was the time when we lost the partnership with United Way.
So we don't have access to records on how much we paid.
I do not believe we gave any money to any customer. It's still sitting in an account.
Earning interest, I hope.
It's like $6,300. So we dug into that since the previous meeting. We don't have a way to distribute it at the moment.
To point out, United Way has been imploding as a local organization in many places around the country for the last decade. And the DC area is a shadow of what it used to be. And I would suspect that and they pull back all across the board. I hate to the detriment because they didn't have the money to raise money and raise less money and pull back more, and it became spiral. So I would suspect that their decision not to go forward was unrelated to, gee, we don't think this is a good program, versus they just didn't have staff. They basically were cutting their staff back and reducing their kind of local footprints. It used to be a United Way office. It used to be a United Way staff person. Assigned Alexandria as the sole. I'm not sure her job is full and part-time. That hasn't existed for a number of years. That just got erased. So I would suspect the United Way's decision not to go forward had nothing to do with the merits of the program. Probably had to do with their own internal workings and what their priorities were. They've just been trying to stay afloat.
I know a number of utilities work through other charitable organizations for their water fund type programs. I think the DC Water uses Salvation Army. Is it?
HRSD,
They use the
Salvation Army.
Salvation Army.
I have no doubt that there is, whether it's Alive, whether it's the Salvation Army, or any, I don't know, we have over 100 nonprofits in the city, that somewhere out there, there's somebody who it's a good organizational fit, that would be willing to do it. Step identify. If we want to go that route, who that might be. Mr. Beal, do you have any thoughts you want to add?
He's on
Just a
mute.
minute.
We can't hear you. Your mic might be off.
Very smart.
I don't have anything else to add right now.
Okay. Any other general discussion before we start through our list?
Question, is this exercise, are we looking at this completely decoupled from our million or so dollars that are non-payment that's kind of sitting there? Is this just kind of looking at it as a moving forward as a whole? Who are we helping? Who are we not? Or are we thinking that this is the reason that we have those non-payments is partially because of this? Like, just kind of wondering.
I'll give my opinion, but I want everybody to jump in. I view this as independent of the delinquency challenge we have. Okay, I think the delinquency challenge is an artifact or a result of policy changes put in place for COVID, and we've got to work through that. But no, this is independent of that. But let's be honest, that data has created a lot of sort of smoke and confusion and mud around this issue. Right?
And I guess the reason that I'm asking is because just kind of wondering what kind of data we've garnered from that as to how much of it is affordability, how much of it is just other things, and if that's relevant or not to this conversation.
If you look at the graph, the wonderful presentation on page 25, the delinquency graph. And you can't draw too many conclusions from the data, but I look at it and it makes me think that we probably I think it's 100 or 150 households that represent the lowest point in that curve. For them, I suspect we have a genuine affordability problem. I think what happens to the right of that low point is a result of policy changes we put in place for COVID. But I think that low point of the curve represents a number of households, in my off the cuff calculation is it's between 100 and 200 have genuine problems in paying their water bill. And I say that because right now we have about 1,000 accounts that are delinquent, if I'm right. And if you just look at the ratios, that low point seems to be about 10% of the height of the tallest point. So just 10% of 1,000 is approximately 100, plus or minus. So I think there is a number of people, households, who have affordability challenges.
Can I add a couple things?
Sure, absolutely.
I agree with a lot of that, but I also would not assume that those like 150 households are the only households with affordability. During our last meeting, Mr. Beal said so eloquently that there are households that can afford to pay and don't, but there are also a lot of households that can't afford to pay but do. And maybe they're cutting other expenses to make up for it. So I just wanted to repeat that because I just thought that was so well stated. I also want to say one other thing about this delinquency graph. First of all, I completely agree that this is a separate issue from affordability. But on the question of like why it started going up under COVID, I don't know if this is right, but I think it's important not to mistake correlation for causation. Like, yes, delinquencies went up when disconnections were prohibited, but that's also like when COVID was happening and a lot of people couldn't work.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, is it because shutoffs were suspended or was it because people didn't have money to pay? You know, I don't think we know. I don't think we can tell from this graph. But I think that we should not be hyper focused on the delinquency data when we're thinking about policy, like long-term
I agree.
persistence or affordability or whatever it was.
We had the overview of our payment assistance programs. It's a good time to maybe turn to staff and get them to give us that overview. We talked about it a little bit, but
Ms. Hammer is stealing my best lines. I agree that we don't want to conflate those two. I think the delinquencies are something we do need to address, but that needs to be separate from affordability.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we're talking about our existing assistance programs and how we might want to enhance them based on the way the room's set up tonight, when we're talking about the existing payment plan, we can kind of walk through our payment plans currently are 48 months in duration. We had discussed at previous board meetings to bring those back down to 12 months, but right now our payment plans are up to 48 months through Promise. Right now, in addition to the payment plans, we waive late fees on bills when people enroll in payment plans, so those late fees get waived. We also have direct outreach to customers to get support through other nonprofits like United Way. We do receive bill payments from other nonprofits on behalf of some residents on a monthly basis. So we'll get a check from United Way, for example, that will be paying a customer's bill on, month to month. And that's something that we've had since I've been here at the organization. We support LIWAP, CARES, and ARPA. We're still lobbying for a permanent fund through LIWAP, through the federal government. We have the water fund, as mentioned, which does require some 501c3 support. When we initially started this discussion, Ms. Waters and I made calls around to other nonprofits such as Salvation Army to see if they would be interested in supporting the water fund. We mentioned Alive as well as another potential option. And then rolling out, Mr. Robertson will give a briefing on this tomorrow night, but rolling out next month, we will have the ability to have opt-in contributions with our new billing system. Some people call it a customer roundup on their bill. But we do need a place for those funds to go.
Mhm.
We will finally have a billing system that can accept donations and charitable contributions or a roundup program on the bill. That will be a phase implemented as quickly as, the board would like, but it's something that we have the ability to do that we do not have right now through Greater Cincinnati Waterworks.
You mentioned that since you've been here, that there are some nonprofits that pay bills. Does it make sense to try to partner with those nonprofits to distribute the 6,300 and then potentially anything else, as opposed to, if they're already there and they've already got kind of a structure to pay bills, that might be a faster way.
To get rid of,
Not just the 6,300, but if whatever else that we collect, if there's already kind of a structure out there.
I'm not sure how, I think the one thing we talk about when we talk about assistance programs, if there's a one-stop shop for assistance around energy, water, all of these things. I'm not sure how the customers get in contact with the 501c3s to make the payment, but it's something that we do notice when the bills have been coming in. As we started trying to dig into the delinquencies a bit more and get more data behind it.
Yeah, it might be good for staff to have a conversation with Department of Community and Human Services. They had I remember the name of it, Community Services section, and they coordinate with the nonprofits who are in this business, whether it's, I think Christchurch does some of this, Alive does some of this, where somebody, calls, says, I have a problem, refer to one of those organizations, because they also want to make sure that people aren't cherry picking, going to 5 different organizations, and how that happens in that kind of business. I think they could probably provide the quickest. Here's the 10 organizations in the city who basically have a fund that you go to on a individual need basis that then is considered and within certain parameters and paid for by whatever funds those organizations have.
But I think also maybe coordinating with those nonprofits could give us a good idea to address kind of what Becky and Jim talked about, where those people that can't afford the bill but are still paying it. I'm trying to get a maybe better data as to what the kind of a better sense of the problem. If they're the ones on the ground helping people, they probably have better data than kind of, the back of the envelope stuff that we're kind of trying to figure out.
Great, I agree.
We could probably tally how many checks we got from the nonprofits paying bills to get a rough order of magnitude on value.
Is it like Act Alexandria from there? I bet it is. And Alive, yep. Yeah.
To customer service.
And they might also be a good conduit to help us get the word out.
But we shouldn't assume that the only people who need help are the people who have already reached out for help.
Sure.
But I think that's a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just scratches the surface. It's one based on who they might know, or if they're social worker or caseworker. They said, hey, look, the food stamps are the SNAP, the name, right? It didn't be enough this much. I got a real problem.
Right.
The caseworker may say, but here's a phone number to call, and people network, and this is where people learn about it, and those names get passed on. But this is the reason this is not primarily governmental program, because it's ad hoc. It's who you maybe happen to know, or who your neighbor got help from, and somebody down the hallway doesn't talk to anybody who knows about those programs. It doesn't know there's anybody. So this is not broad knowledge in the community, given the transient nature of our community, which issues. And in fact, we have not just one kind of a very large nonprofit who handles these things, but rather some regional. And we got, as I said, over 100 and some nonprofits in the community. So it's really relatively haphazard. It is not a system, put it that way.
Mhm.
And therefore it's not systematically getting at the need. It's getting at largely, I think, the data solving an immediate crisis of a particular household.
Yeah, I was trying to just kind of get a grasp of the magnitude of the problem, just to, preparing for this meeting. So I used the data that you gave us last month on average, like bill size for different bill amounts for different household sizes. And then I kind of was trying to figure out how many households in Alexandria were below the income level at which that would be considered unaffordable according to these commonly accepted metrics. And I think it seemed like it's probably around 5,000 to 10,000 households. But it's hard to tell because the available income data that's available that I could find from the city didn't show by household size. So for, a household of one, their sewer bill is smaller because they're using less water. And so the income at which that's unaffordable is lower than a larger size household that's got a bigger bill. So as a percentage of income, higher income is needed for that to be affordable. So I couldn't really you would have to do a more kind of detailed analysis to calculate it by household size, but that was kind of my general impression of rough number of households that would be affected or considered in need under that generally accepted metric.
We have the twist that a good portion of those are going to be renters.
Right. So that
Which
complicates
means
things.
they're not most cases, not our direct customer.
Right.
It's another.
That said, one of the options on our list is a city operated program. So the city can reach renters in a way that we can't in terms of providing public assistance. So it's something to keep in mind.
Well, let's stay on that thought, because I'm sort of thinking the same way. Because if you look at the water drop on, I think it's page 8, the city bill is almost as big as our bill.
Mm-hmm.
You add the stormwater fee and their part of the collection network. I think that's $600 or $700 a year. So we're only solving half the problem. Granted, it's the half we're responsible for. But that's why I think partnering with the city might make a lot of sense. By the way, looking at the other affordability assistance programs around the country, most of them really deal with water and sewer and stormwater together.
A lot of
Many
them
of
do.
them do.
Yeah.
Many of them do, just by the nature of their.
They have an
organizations.
advantage when they have everything kind of combined and they're not dealing with separate utilities. It does make things more complicated. But my point about the city with regards to renters is that they have access to alternative mechanisms of actually providing the support, through tax rebates, because dollars are fungible, right? So you can get a credit on your sewer bill, or you can get the same size credit off your city tax bill. It's the same to you. So, for renters where they're not getting a bill from us directly, that could be shit. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves though, I think.
Do we know if the city's doing any kind of assistance program for their portion of this water bill or?
The stormwater fee.
Yeah.
Stormwater fee for those people who get real estate tax relief, which are going to be permanently totally disabled homeowners. And those homeowners who at least one owner of the house is 65 or older will are eligible for real estate tax relief if their income it's a sliding scale how much relief you get. It's 40,000 and less in your household, you get 100% relief from your taxes, and then it goes up to 100,000, where I think you can defer your taxes eventually. It just becomes a lien for your estate, basically, in the long term. So there is a city program It does not cover anybody who is lower income, in that income range, who's not either totally disabled or 65 or older. And that's has to do with the fact that those programs are authorized by state code. There are also disabled veterans programs, which the state mandated, and so localities, oh, you guys pay for it. So for those people who get real estate tax relief, from the city, then there is also relief on their solid waste bill, their stormwater utility fee. Those are the two that are provided. Water, it's a private company, and we've got a kind of a really an unusual circumstance situation compared to most places. City also provides relief for people who, for those real estate tax relief folks, for their taxes. It's all, so it's all, or it may be all. I'm not sure how much relief they provide. If you're in one of those programs, I know you get relief. The lowest level is 100%, maybe 100% of the highest levels as well. Because I don't think the city spends a lot of time parsing through things. The car tax is also not set up based on income, but it's set up based on, I mean, if you have an old used car, you know, basically it's got down to the point of 5,000 or less, you don't pay any personal property tax. Like a car, your tax is zero. And that was set up knowing that is a way also changing from everybody pays the same based on value to something different. But we can get, staff can talk to the revenue section of the finance department, runs those programs and get very specific. Here's the eligibility and the asset requirements, and here's exactly what people get. If you are a renter, whether you're rent from a nonprofit or rent from a for-profit, you're basically paying full freight. Those commercial entities and or nonprofit urban owners are paying full real estate taxes and full all other fees, albeit if they're providing, their assessment isn't as high. If they're providing, if their income stream is lower because they've got either legally restricted units that they're renting to low income folks, or that's just the niche that they're building and not what they decided to. So to some degree, there's a bit of tax relief because real estate taxes based on value, and lower income apartments have less value than some luxury high rise next to a metro station.
Mark, you know your way around City Hall. If we were to explore with the city some kind of program for assisting residents pay total water bill, right? Stormwater, wastewater, maybe even water supply. How do we approach that? Who do we approach? What's the first step we would take? Again, this would be a program paid for out of general revenue.
I think first is to work with city staff to get beyond, as Sammer had said, the data you can find. Clearly, for every data that's on the website, there's a ton of data that staff can get access to or familiar with. The city is funded. I'm not sure if they've started a program to look at increasing what the city provides as far as rental relief is concerned. So, I mean, Arlington has a rental relief program that I think they spend like $8 million a year. I think the city's rental relief program, if it's 150,000, that might be, it's more an emergency basis. and you get on a waiting list. Starling has an entitlement program, and you just like real estate tax relief is in Alexandria, which is if you meet certain income levels and certain other specific criteria, and you get your rent check subsidized. So I think probably the first part is sitting with staff with city staff and working with them on kind of seeing how the bigger picture and then figuring how it gets broken down. I think in regards to the study they're going to do on rent relief, saying, well, how are you calculating that? Are you calculating it so that it has all utilities included, including the Alex Renew charge, the water charge, the city's wastewater, so that in effect it's all inclusive. And that's one way the city could end up, in a sense, funding and providing relief calculated in such a way for that could end up helping people with their water related utility bills.
Jim has patiently had his hand up.
And a couple of questions. Mr. Jinks, does the city have any relief for their water, or rather their sewer infrastructure fee that isn't added on to our bill?
No.
I think that's one thing we could ask them to look at. The second is I wonder if we're thinking too small, that besides water and sewer bills, that electric and gas are, I'm sure, a hardship for lower income residents. I think we ought to look at some sort of holistic program in the city that addresses all the utilities.
The LIHEAP program covers electric and gas.
I'm sorry?
The LIHEAP program, are you familiar with that?
No.
It's a federal assistance program administered by the states it stands for Low Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program. So that already exists, but it does make sense to try to think about how they could, if we move forward, how whatever we come up with could be integrated or coordinated so that the people who are seeking assistance from one are also plugged into the other. Hope like the eligibility criteria could be harmonized. That would simplify things. Isn't that how it's for LIWAP?
Yeah,
They just use the LIHEAP.
they used that. For the initial, they did it in two phases. The initial was they looked for SNAP, they looked for a number of existing programs, and those were the first ones who were deemed eligible. So definitely did not capture everyone, but that data exists. Probably Promise has it. So that would be a good place to start. So they would have anybody who's eligible for LIHEAP.
The other question I have, looking at rental units, that some of the rental units pass on their water bill and pass it through to residents. I'm sure there are some that don't, and I wonder if the city has any data on how landlords set rents or what the cost of water and sewer, how it affects the rent costs. It's I don't see how you quantify that, and I would guess a lot of the lower income residents are in rental units and they're in older rental units.
I think what the housing staff, I've talked about this issue with them over the years, and it's come up city council, and it's all over the map because you've got types of rental units you've got some that are not in good shape, that are in neighborhoods where the rents tend to be lower, where the landlord must look at what are my costs. I'm going to cost-based rent set. And then you have the institutional investor kind of types, let's say like Morgan Properties out on Beauregard. They're going to use rental software that tells them every day what's the amount that what's the market for rent in a particular type or by particular area, and they then set rents based on market. So I think you'd find those units that are more institutional investors, large companies that own thousands of rental units, they're going to be setting the rent based on what the market will bear.
Mhm.
So on, less so on costs. And then you're gonna have folks who maybe own 4 units or 6 units or 12 units in a older building that may look more to somewhat to the market, but will look to you know what their costs are as part of their decision on what to charge for rent. And then you have folks who will say, you know what, you've been a tenant here. You only get inflation on your rental bill. But if somebody comes in, you leave and somebody comes into your unit, that person immediately goes to market. So you also have situations that are such that even the same unit may not have the same, may have substantially different rent based upon the individuals in it. So the challenge with dealing with rental is there is no uniform kind of, here is the predominant kind of rental unit in our community, and by applying a certain program or standard, we make sure we will get 80% of the people.
Do you know how common it is, or if this is information that is gettable? How common it is for landlords to include like utilities within the rent versus to have the renter pay like a separate line item such that they're seeing what their sewer
I
cost
asked city
is?
staff that information. They don't have it from a quantitative collection point, but the staff that works with tenant landlord issues said it's about half of the landlords are basically passing through utility costs. So they actually hire an outside company who does this magic wizard software that divides up all the utility bills and figures it out down the individual unit, even though those units are not separately metered. Right. That's part of the dilemma here. And then then people get an additional bill for utilities.
And probably all utilities added together.
That's the assumption is it's all utilities, but I'm not 100% sure. I think one of the questions is the staff questions is to do some legwork on like going to Morgan Properties or to some of the other big property owners, because that's largely going to be the big property owners who are going to do this sophisticated charge you out your utilities and find out what's the predominant practices. How does it work? I mean, I don't think we also have yet good data on what's the average usage, what's the average bill. We have our average bill, but our average is an average of lots of different circumstances. And I think we would find that renters are probably I would assume we're using less water on a per capita basis and per household basis. But then again, I don't know to what degree landlords have put in low flow fixtures either to help reduce people. And that's another way and one of the things on the list, because I was thinking about how things we talk about, and said, maybe a way to help renters is some way of incenting, and this maybe we'll take the city to assist with incenting energy efficiencies, water use efficiencies in rental units as a way to help people with their bills. It's thinking out loud rather than being able to point and say, well, there are energy assistance programs that the city does that are pretty volunteer based, some money, doing minor things. And clearly doing plumbing is a whole lot different than putting extra insulation in your attic.
Mark, you worked in the city for a while. How do you think city staff would react if we were to reach out to them? But if Alex Renew staff would reach out to them to talk about these ideas and these options?
I think they would react very positively. I mean, they're dealing with the same issues. I think the important thing is not to say we want
No.
We want your money is kind of our
No, that's-
first sentence of the conversation.
That's not a
Because
good-
I'm gonna, whoa, versus we recognize there's an issue. You guys are dealing, the city's dealing with housing rental costs issues. And it would seem to be that having something that's holistic, that kind of says, how do we best approach this? And part of it's getting more data so we understand what our impact is. And I said partly as being in the tent with the city as they try to figure out if they're going to take an initiative.
It's also like compelling to them to point out that we face legal constraints.
Right.
That they don't. And so, we're exploring our options, and it could even be presented to them as a pilot program or a temporary, like a bridge program, like until and unless, we get the legislature to change the Authorities Act such that we have a clear authority to operate our own assistance program. I mean, they might bite if it's not going to be forever. But also, I think long-term, it would be better to run something in-house, because when it's up to the council, it's subject to the vicissitudes of the city budget, right? It's like, if the budget's tight one year, they might decide this is something that they can cut and then leave the customers in the lurch who have come to depend on the assistance that's being provided. So, in a perfect world, it would be something that we had control over long-term, but recognizing that right now we may not have clear legal authority to do that, maybe a city-operated program could be a near to medium term kind of option.
I think approaching partnership with the city on this issue, I think would also reveal a lot of data.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we should do that one way or the other.
It's going to
Get the
reveal a
data.
lot of data.
Yeah.
Which we need. Yeah.
You don't think that, so I hear what you're saying about having an internal program. I just wonder if I wonder if there's efficiencies to getting to the people who need it all kind of in one shot, as opposed to kind of going our own way. And
That's definitely an argument on the other side. Yeah. I see that for sure.
And you also could, as Nanda has said, kind of reminded us in regards to some other programs have been done. We could say, we don't want to get in the eligibility business, but we know that the city has a list of SNAP recipients that have addresses, and we can match those to say, if you met that hurdle, you're in.
Oh, you mean if we were running our own?
If we were running our own doesn't mean doing necessary eligibility, because that's the part we don't know much about. It gets very administrative.
It's common,
to the
I
degree
think.
of which the city has a number of programs that have
Eligibility.
already done that. Then it's like, if we decided we wanted to cover the elderly and permanently totally disabled, all we have to do is look at the city's program and say, how much of those folks do we want? What do we want to cover income wise? Say to the city, this is, or the city, you should do that. And they're defined. The people of, exactly who they are, what their addresses are, what homes they own. And it would be fairly simple to do.
I think efficiency isn't a huge concern once the program's set up. If we're thinking about people who receive a bill directly from us, it's when the renters come in, then like that I think could lead to potential inefficiencies with us running something versus the city. But I mean, I think they're all workable options. It's just pros and cons.
Could we take a pause here and get staff?
And I think Mr. Beal
Oh,
has
Mr.
been
Beal, your
patiently
hand is
waiting
up.
to say something.
We had a couple of examples from other cities that were running customer assistance programs. Richmond does something very similar to the water fund, it looks like. They said they use grants and donations. The Northeast Ohio program, I couldn't find a lot about, but I know on their website. If you look at their assistance, they take you to a community housing program, so they've outsourced at least part of that. I think we need to look very carefully at continuing and expanding the customer assistance program in conjunction with trying to get the city involved too. That I think if we publicize that, and if we've got an agency or a nonprofit that can help administer that, that could go a long way toward helping those in need.
Really quick on the SNAP comment, that's what Jackson is looking into as their affordability eligibility criteria. If you qualify for SNAP, you qualify for their water affordability program. That's early days, but that's what they're looking at.
Does that have a higher threshold than, for example, some others?
Right now, it's just, there's a presentation 2 weeks ago, and they're trying to use SNAP as their.
It's higher, but if you looked at the incomes, we
Yeah.
wouldn't say that they were even middle income.
It's like,
But I mean, it's a working, I mean, SNAP covers working households that are working, whereas most public eligibility programs are going to cover those folks who aren't able to work or are not employed in low to very low income.
The LIHEAP, LIWAP eligibilities for family of four, I think it's like around $40,000 or $45,000. So that's, and I think the federal poverty threshold is like 30,000. So those are kind of the income levels we're thinking about.
Could I ask a question of staff? Mr. Carl, we have a very small staff here. And our primary business is cleaning water, and we have this little tunnel project going on. Do we have the capability to explore some of these options? For example, as has been suggested, working with the city to explore their interest in this sort of program. Do we have the staff to do that now?
I mean, I think we do. I mean, a lot of it will be done with our finance staff, communication staff, and myself, but I think we have the ability to do that, to meet with the city. I mean, we meet with the city already. So I think it's just finding the right people and the right contacts. Mr. Jinks can help us with the right contacts to get into the right department staff for the data, but I think it's something that we can certainly manage to collect data and start putting together a story.
As I've read about these programs, from what I can tell, the programs such as in Richmond, and I'm sorry, Philadelphia and Baltimore, it took years to get these programs designed.
Well, those are complex. Those are income-based rate
They are.
programs. So that's different than I think what we're
Yeah,
discussing.
so that's a true affordability program.
I mean,
No,
that's-
I recognize that,
Yeah.
but all these cities have
That's
been
the
on a
dream.
multi-year journey. And I think that's the way we should view this, that this is going to take years to get the data understanding, but we should take a first step. Are we ready to vote?
Well, what
I'm sorry.
I don't think we should assume that, because those are extremely complex
Oh, I agree.
programs. I don't think we're considering anything that complex. So I hope it doesn't take years and years to do something.
No, I actually think we can do water fund things very quickly. And I think discussions with the city, if we can open the right doors, could happen within a year or two. Yeah.
So just for Mr. Beal, the Richmond programs funded through MetroCare is funded through their general fund. It's not a donation. They have a fund through general fund in Richmond. Because they're able, as DPU, they're able to have that access to general fund. If we were an arm of the city, we would have access to that same general fund.
So it's not, I mean, they may be using rates, but they've got other revenue sources besides rates that they're using.
Correct. But when we initially set timelines for this, I think our ability is, I think first we need to go back to the city, but I think we were setting timelines for having some framework by our next budget cycle, which is, starting March, April timeframe was our thought about timing for the board to have some sort of structure to a program that was reasonable enough for us to get some time and do some research to time it with the budget cycle starting in March and have discussions around the framework for the program then. Yeah, that was what we initially thought. That's just
Very reasonable.
a comment.
What about firing up the water fund?
Well, we were ready to go on that. I think we just need to get a 501c3. We pulled back based on our initial discussions. We completely pulled back. Given that we're going to have a larger discussion around affordability, so we held off on doing anything with the water fund, but Amanda looked into it significantly when we first started.
And I think your suggestion about contacting DHHS and the department to figure out, I was calling the Salvation Armies, and there's regional offices. And while the one that serves the HRSD area is very active on this, the one here didn't even know about it, didn't know that this was the possibility. So
I'm involved with outreach at Christchurch and the Lazarus Ministry. They were saying a lot of very positive things about ACT Alexandria.
I just disclosed, I'm on the ACT board
It's got to be a class one operation.
and on the finance committee, and I'm going to be chair of the finance committee soon.
We should definitely spend the money that's in the water fund because it's just sitting there. But I wonder how much time and investment we should put into that if we're looking at other options.
Could I argue? I'm going to argue against that.
Okay.
The reason I think we should do something with the water fund is it sets a tone. It's symbolically important. It creates an opportunity for those who want to give. It's like any charity. Not everybody gives to charity, but you want to create an opportunity where if somebody wants to help their fellow citizen, they can. And
I'm
I
not
think-
saying that we shouldn't.
But, and I also think if we really promoted it, I think we could do a lot better than $6,500.
It's just never, it's never going to be enough.
And
to
Oh,
make
no,
a material
I agree with you.
difference. Yeah.
It will never be.
when you start partnering with a 501c3, are there some initial expenses? Like, could that then go for the seed money to begin administering the program?
It would depend if we have the records on what we said the money was going to be used for.
That's right.
When we solicited it from people, we have to be consistent
Mhm.
with that. But I think we kind of figure out what we want to do, and then I think we get back into, okay, is there administrative costs? How do you cover that administrative cost? I think it's worth expanding what we're doing and proceeding is the kind of while we work out everything else, as well as it gives an example, how big can it get? How many people are willing to round up and donate money and the degree to which if our experience is like a lot of other utilities, it'll be important that people get it, but it won't be enough. Because you said it won't be enough. And that will be kind of part of what's saying to the city, hey, look, we went the non-governmental funding route and got this far. The
My
need is this
concern-
far, and therefore,
My concern is just that Mr. Bill wants to talk, but Mike, it's like, I've seen this happen in other places. It's like you set up a program like this and then you say to the city, well, we need more. They're going to say, oh, but you just set up this program. Let's see how that works out first. And then they kick the can down the road. And it's like, we've got this little program and that's all. And then nothing else ever happened. I've just seen it happen in like multiple places. And I just don't want that to be where we get roadblocked because, maybe city staff say, let's see how the water fund plays out first before we put any time into doing something bigger. Like, sorry.
No, you have that experience.
Yeah,
You have
I
that
just,
experience.
I don't want us to make a symbolic difference. I want us to like materially improve the lives of
But
the
I
people
don't-
in the city.
I don't think it's either. In my mind, I don't think it's either. But let me ask one more question though. If we generate revenue in places we haven't generated revenue before, crazy ideas, charging for the use of this room.
Crazy idea.
Charging for parking when folks.
renting out the 5th floor.
Or charging for parking when people watch their kids play soccer. Could we use that revenue?
It's not user fee revenue, so there's a lot more flexibility with it.
Before,
small potatoes.
sorry, Jim,
Yeah.
I know you've been waiting, but I'm
It's,
I'm sort of
it's, all-
Becky on this one. My concern is that we've got $6,300. We give people an opportunity to give. We get people who need it excited, and there's just not any money. Like after, 6,300, and then maybe people will give and we get another few thousand, but that goes really fast. And I guess that would be my concern, is that people get excited, they get the one-time gift or whatever, but there's not enough interest to keep it going.
And then it's not something that a family can depend on, it's not predictable.
I
Why don't
wanna-
you feel
I
tough?
want to counter Becky's point that I think if that happens, you say, look, you say to the city, we've raised this much money from donations, we've spent it all, that we want to continue to do that, but there's a need that we need city participation in this. I'd add one more nonprofit to Mr. Jinks and Mr. Hill's list, and that's Alive, which has done this sort of thing for a long time also. And I think organizations that are set up to give money to people that are in need probably aren't going to have a lot of administrative costs in dispersing more money that they get. They already know where the needs are and they know how to spend it.
I think when you've seen affordability programs for utilities that have been more mature, that have been implementing these for a longer time, they'll use something like a water fund for like one-time assistance, sort of like CARES, things like that. They're using it for customers that there's no qualification criteria. It's used to help if there's an issue where you lose a job or you're in duress, and they use that fund for that. It's not for affordability. They're completely distinct and separate. So I think if the water fund were to exist, the ask would be, could that be used for these like one-time assistance, the CARES type assistance, which we definitely saw an impact in when we did get CARES funding that didn't have any strings attached to it. So that's sort of what some other utilities are doing.
It's emergency assistance fund.
I like
Right.
that.
What a lot of our nonprofits, that's what the same.
It's also just more
they
clear
use.
messaging then too, in terms of the purposes of that versus a larger program that we're seeking to establish. So that
No.
is very helpful.
I think targeted that way, I think that could strengthen our argument to the city.
Those utilities that have successful roundup / donation programs, it would be nice to, for like you mentioned Northeast Ohio, they have an incredible communication program. They're
Amazing on
they're
Twitter.
amazing, yeah. And so I wonder if there is that direct correlation between those that really have a good communication plan for getting this out, because donations probably is where you're going to get more bang for the buck. And they have assistance fairs and they just seem to be marketing it a lot.
I'm sorry, you said assistance fairs?
Yes, yes. So they hold fairs where they inform, they'll have it as.
They're like FAIR.
Oh, yes.
FAIR, thank you.
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
He's giving me dirty looks because he's like, you see my communications?
They just use Twitter.
I was gonna mention that.
Overburdened already.
We've had good discussion. Are we ready to?
So what's
Are
next?
we ready to?
Do we not want to look at any of these other options under potential funding sources?
Well, I have a question about, just a clarifying question, I guess. So the one that's labeled income-based rate assistance program, that kind of mashes up two different sets of words. So like income-based rates are kind of like what Philly and Baltimore have, versus like an income qualified assistance program is, I think, more aligned what we've been talking about.
That meant,
Which one do we mean?
sorry. My thought was that income-based rate was sort of what is being done in Philadelphia, Baltimore, being proposed in Michigan.
Okay. So then we don't have a board for then an income qualified assistance program that we operate
We
in.
can add it under, we put
Okay.
others for funding and also for,
Because those are both, ones
Structure.
we've decided are of dubious legality currently. So how are we supposed to consider that when we're, ranking our preferences? Is this like a longer term preference? Like assuming we could get changes to the law, would we want to adopt income-based rates, or like what is the question that's being put to us?
And what is an income-based fix?
Yeah.
That's the low flow fixture program,
Fixture.
right?
That's
Fixture.
it didn't fit.
fixture. Got it.
Looks like there's room there for TURE. I'm just saying.
It was Friday, 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Who's got the green pen? We should fix, because I was looking at that going, what is that?
Mr. Beal had the green one.
I'm sorry?
No, it's just at your chair where you're
Okay.
sitting.
Friday evening.
These-
Those poor extra like letters at happy hour.
Local paying, subsidizing somebody install local fixtures like the city does backflow preventers.
So I guess to answer Ms. Hammer, your question, the city-owned program is kind of what we thought as the qualifying eligibility program.
So we're not, okay.
And then these were funding sources. So those were the ideas of the programs. We could put other ones up there. And then these were the funding sources.
But my question is like, are we supposed to consider whether it's legal for us to do this now? Because I remember in the back and forth of the memos, there was a response that income-based rates are not currently authorized.
That would be this one for further lobbying to get.
It's just hard to know like whether to vote on it without knowing if we're gonna be able to get the law changed. But I guess.
No,
Sorry,
it was just-
I'm doing
it
too
was
much
just-
like lawyer brain.
It was
right
just
now.
we had that over there as a funding source to do we would have to get that as a funding source to be able to do maybe an income-based rate program owned and operated by.
Or a customer assistance program
Right.
that we
Yeah.
operate as well,
Yeah.
right?
Anything where we have a cap funded through rate revenues is gonna come back to this.
So maybe for now, leave that off.
Like, are we considering, is the question, what should we do right now?
Yeah.
Because that can't be on the list if we don't think we can do it right now. Like that we can do right now. We can lobby.
Yeah.
Do you want to speak to that for a minute based on what we've talked about since our last meeting?
About,
The rate, using rate revenue for a customer assistance program? So we reached out to BWWA as discussed, and we actually started the discussion with the association. And right now, we're just trying to get a feel for what other authorities, might have gone back and asked a similar question. To date, we don't know of any other than us that have approached this at our association level. So out of the authorities in Virginia, we don't know of any that have kind of went down this path yet.
correct. And we would be looking for not going alone on this in the long term and have it be a group effort that was endorsed by one of the state associations.
Well, just because we're first doesn't mean that there aren't others that might be interested.
Are there ways to communicate with others?
So
Yeah.
there's two ways. So there's just specific authorities. It's called BWWAA. I'm not gonna try and get that mouthful out. But we're active. We've always been. And then the other avenue is VAMWA, and VAMWA is where we bring in all water and wastewater utilities. BWWA is just for authorities like Alex Renette.
Well, can you communicate in that venue to see if there are other utilities that are interested in this?
Yeah.
So that we could lobby more effectively?
Maybe all who wants to change the law.
Yes, and that's kind of, we started the discussion.
I think I would suspect, at least it'll be Northern Virginia, we're more likely to be interested in the authority, and you've got water authorities. It's predominantly business model in Northern Virginia. And we are the oddball exception, with a private water company.
Yes, so yes, we can, absolutely, and we are doing that kind of outreach. Now, we also don't want to push ahead, since this will take some General Assembly activity. So we don't want it to get out there right now with mixed messages based on what we discussed at the last board meeting. So it's more right now, let's get a feel for who feels constrained by the current law, who would like to see that change to, even just consideration of other factors would be better than what the statutes currently states. And we've also, Terry's on the phone, and I had a long conversation with him. He knows so much about this issue. I've not seen anybody do a thorough analysis on this yet. And that's also part of what we're looking for. Is you always hear that it's been ruled out, but some of the attorneys who've ruled it out, I'm trying to talk to figure out, how what they're basing this on. And
Yeah.
You could get, depending on the question you ask, you could get, an answer back that said, oh, yeah, I don't see the authority to do that, versus if you have the governing body interest in doing something, that you may get you can do it. So without somebody doing here's your legal essay. Here's a brief on why it's not legal, short of having somebody done that. It's kind of.
And I'm working on that with, in conjunction with talking to everybody who I've heard say this. And right now, my analysis is focusing on the explicit language that is in the Authorities Act. And even though it says shall and not must, or it says may, not shall, the General Assembly could have put in other factors, but the way they worded it, it's going to be a tough sell if it were to get challenged. And if it were to get challenged, it's not just about, we're back to the drawing board. We would have gone through a major rate restructure. It would be litigated. And if we're found to have acted outside the law, then we have to actually refund money to those who then would be claiming that they were subsidizing this program. So you don't want to get it wrong, but a thorough analysis needs to be done. And with everyone who sort of has commented on this, we need to see what they think once it's done.
The one other avenue
Can we get an example of an income-based program from a utility that revenues are only rate-based? And we've talked about this. I'm curious how it would actually work.
It's just Philadelphia and Baltimore are the only two that have gone that road.
And are those working well?
I think the general consensus seems to be that they're working pretty well, but they're so complicated that there are too many administrative burdens, and like a high percentage of the funding for the program is going toward like administrative support compared to actually money going to people, and participation rates aren't as high as they should be. And so I think that is a bit of a cautionary tale in terms of like, it's very complicated as opposed to a cap, which is simpler, but of course, like doesn't address the like root cause of affordability concerns. But
I would think we want to look at how this works before we send our council off on a chase to see if we can do this.
So there's two different kinds of programs that Renew could operate, and we keep kind of skipping back and forth between them. One is income-based rates, which is what Philadelphia and Baltimore are doing, which is where people at different income levels pay different rates. And that is, I think, probably definitely not legal in Virginia currently. But there's also a customer assistance program that we could operate, which is everyone's paying the same rate like now, but low-income customers get a credit on their bill to offset some of the cost. Similar to what we're talking about with the city-operated program, but just operated by Renew. And that, I think, is also legally dubious because it still involves some amount of cross-subsidization, because it's still rate revenue that we're using to give the credits to the lower income customers. So those are both two alternative options that would require legislative change. So I think income-based rates is maybe, I don't know if that's something we want to pursue, but a renew operated cap is a much lower lift, I think, easier lift, that would be worth pursuing legislative change to allow ourselves to do. Did you think I summarized
Uh,
it?
I think the
Can,
question,
can we, are there examples of a cap program in utility that revenues are based solely on rates?
DC Water.
Okay.
They have a cap that's rate funded. In Maryland, they recently passed a state law that allowed utilities to operate rate funded caps. So like WSSC just implemented one like a year or two ago. So in the region, it's happening. It's just not in Virginia.
Mr.
I
Beal,
think it'd be worth seeing details of those, just so we know what we're looking at.
Mr. Hill passed around a 2017 study that was done by North Carolina a few weeks ago. And that outlined a bunch of different types of caps and the two true affordability programs in the United States. It was the old version. It didn't recognize authorities necessarily in Virginia. All they did is added a sentence in it for Virginia. But that shows you where there are legal challenges, where there might not be legal challenges. DC Water has legislation that encourages them to have a cap. I think the question that we're all talking about is going back to discuss with our association is, can we use rate funding to subsidize other customers' rates, whether that be income-based or it's just a cap? I think that's the question that the 5 factors in the Virginia Water and Waste Act state that we want to get clarification on. I think the other piece that we didn't mention is we also had another idea. We had a few ideas. I think the best idea is to go to the association and have a discussion as a whole. We also thought about going to a judge and getting a judge's read on this. It's like Amanda could explain this better than I can, but getting a judge's read on it to understand the law. But again, that's not cut and dry. It's just what you get, and you need to be careful what you ask for when you go to that judge.
You're
So
talking about an advisory?
something along those lines. Preston went through it in
Yeah, I don't know how you get an advisory.
full detail.
Isn't
Yeah.
that like one of the core tenets of
Right.
judicial
That they do
opinions,
not
that they
issue
don't do
advisory
advisory
opinions.
opinions?
That's why
So it
the
was something
attorney
along
general-
those lines.
Okay.
Anyways,
Yeah.
going to
There's validation suits
Yeah.
that you can file
the.
A validation suit.
validation suit, but I'm not sure, I mean, that's to validate bonds or to take certain actions
Yeah.
that says basically the judge can decide that, and if nobody appeals it within 30 days or 60 days, that judge's opinion,
Yeah.
you can rely upon that forever, but I'm not sure with
That's
this
That's-
kind of circumstance.
That's what he was suggesting,
Okay.
correct? And then the other was going to the Attorney General. I think politically, we're not there at the moment from a where we stand in the state. I think we've been best served, as Alex knew, through the associations that we belong to, and we have to get association support because we also don't want to, rub another authority the wrong way. There's some authorities we have in Northern Virginia. We just want to see where they're at. And I think the Michigan case that I shared last week was where you saw Great Lakes Water Authority rally around and get support from a senator to take this to their assembly for consideration. I think that's sort of where we kind of landed after the last meeting with respect to any rate funded cap.
I think it's important. One of the reasons it's important to proceed is because the first thing, if we want city money, the first thing the city's going to say is, why don't you do it yourself? Oh, we're not sure if we have to. Why don't you get the
It would
authority?
be nice to be able to say we're trying, but like,
We tried it, we run into
Yeah.
a dead end or
Well, it
whatever.
seems like we're already kind of going down that path for
Yeah.
We want to answer the question because you all asked the question at the last meeting. We want to be responsive, and we are working on it at the moment. But we just wanted to get the letter out for the extension first.
Well, I guess my
Which is
point
that-
is, from a voting standpoint, I feel like we're already kind of down that, going down that path to a certain degree,
Longer term.
whether it ends up going anywhere or not.
But you can still vote for
Or not.
I think-
Said if the rate assumes a certain way of providing income assistance, do we just want to say income-based assistance and leave that, whether it's a credit, a cap, a credit, or a rate to a future
I
discussion?
would vote differently on income-based rates than I would on a like renew funded cap. Like I wouldn't want to vote on those two things as one item. So that we can just consider that to be the other board, maybe.
Writing cap.
Does your opt-in / donations include going after like grant funding? Or is that
Sorry,
other?
sorry.
Like
Just-
grants, going after grants.
Yeah.
Is that part of opt-in
Or-
/ donations, or
Yeah.
would that be under, like, would that be something else?
I think for tonight's discussion, we would see grants under other, but that's something we pursue just as is.
I would argue putting it in, because we're creating almost too many choices now.
Well, I
'Cause I think,
there's a different level of effort, right? If you're doing opt-in donations through our current ratepayers, it's much lower than going to foundations or going to, it's a lower level of effort, which I think probably needs to be considered. Because as you said, we are small.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be comfortable say opt-in donations or other outside sources.
other outside, but by the way, including
Yes.
revenue we could generate ourselves, which I still think is an option.
Okay, so over there, we changed it to rate funded cap, so that's if we're able to raise rates and then subsidize other ratepayers, and then we left income-based rates over there, which is where we have a tiered structure based on income.
For other sources of revenue. Maybe not what you're talking about. I'm thinking foundations. Do we have the staff to be able, like, do our staff automatically go after any grants? Like, I'm thinking fundraising, I'm thinking that kind of stuff, or is that going to be a little bit more of a heavy lift on staff?
So right now, we seek grants based on our capital projects that we're pursuing. So if there's biogas credits, we look at different grants available for biogas. We do have a policy analyst in-house that looks for these types of grants. We also participate with the city. They have a consultant that shares information on grants that we get. I think it's a quarterly email on grants that we pursue, so we can leverage our relationship with the city for some grants. But we do that based on our CIP, and then there's some workforce grants coming out of EPA that we're also pursuing. So
It's hard to find grants that will pay for this sort of thing.
Well, I was thinking foundation, like
Yeah.
sort of fundraising more than necessarily just grants. We've got a lot of multinational corporations in the general vicinity who are always looking to greenwash a little. I mean, hey, listen, if
That's
if
true.
that's
Not
what you
wrong.
wanna do,
You're not.
That's true.
I think fundraising would go with opt-in donations funding.
Okay, as long as it includes that.
Who is the purple one?
I'm purple.
Because I'm just thinking that might take a little bit more effort of somebody like kind of pounding the pavement to start trying to, guilt people into giving us some of their money.
We haven't even talked about the like payment in lieu of taxes idea that you all kind of pitched last time. Is that something that's still, we should consider
I
still on the table? Like I see it's up there, it just hadn't been mentioned tonight. I still think it's a cool idea.
I agree. I think it's
But I don't know, is it like,
card.
is
I
it
don't-
realistic?
I don't know if it's a card. It's a primary card.
Right.
It's kind of a secondary
I'm
card.
just
Somebody
trying to
does
like
funding
feel
sources.
that out, like what's the, he's led, now he's laughing, like what is, how am I supposed to interpret the laughter?
Why don't you share your feelings on the pilot, Mr. Hill?
I think it's sleight of hand. I think it's accounting sleight of hand. And I think it fools anybody.
Okay.
I really, because I believe very strongly about accounting accuracy and
Mhm.
integrity, I think we weaken our accounting integrity when we do that. I'll let,
Should
CFO
we,
say otherwise.
should we eliminate it as an option?
well, no, people, I'm only one vote of 5.
You're a fearless leader.
No, today I'm acting as a facilitator, or trying to. No,
John, I'm sorry, I'm missing what this discussion is about.
the payment in lieu of taxes.
Okay,
That's where we create an arrangement with the city where they tax us and then we move money around and pretend it's not rate revenue. Mutual
Yeah,
Well, when you
but-
put it that way.
but yeah, that's still, we'd still have to finance that through rates, so
Yeah, yeah,
what's the
My point
difference?
is- Yeah, my point is it's sleight of hand.
all right.
It's going to the back door to accomplish something.
Terry,
that
can you
needs to go to the front door.
Can you explain where this is used? Pilot, your hands up.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that the trust indenture, I believe, is a closed system fund. And, you know, the revenues of the system are defined and there's a flow of funds on how you use the priority of those monies. And so if you want to be able to provide maybe a legal pathway to a user fee funded program, by doing a pilot, you can record that as an operating expense to the system, and then the money can actually leave the fund. And then the city thereby can in turn do a transfer payment back to help you fund the program. And so I've heard that this was a way to sort of create sort of the legal pathway maybe in order to do a user fee funded program. But, you know, some of the criticisms of a user fee funded program are such that they're somewhat regressive in nature, because if you were to fund it with the tax revenue, that would be less regressive in nature. So those are just some of the considerations around it. I don't know of a specific utility that has used that approach directly, but I've talked to some colleagues in the affordability space, and they were the ones that had brought to my attention that was employed in another jurisdiction. I can't name for everyone tonight who that jurisdiction is, but I could try to find out.
Yeah, I think clearly we could probably legally do it, but it's artful.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it's best to, I tend to agree with John. I wouldn't discount it, throw it out forever, but I think it's kind of one of those last resort. If nothing else works, then maybe we kind of think about it, but yeah.
That sounds good.
I think we've got some good options.
Yeah.
Now you have LIWAP up there. Is that a federal, what do we mean by that? Federal program?
Had that.
Pursue a federal
It's
program?
it's the federal, it stands for Low Income Household
No,
Water
I
System.
know what it is,
Okay,
but,
sorry.
but it has expired.
It expired, so that would mean lobbying to get it,
Lobbying to continue it.
guys.
Yeah, knock was
It's
already.
not gonna,
Yeah, knock was lobbying. I heard that there's.
like, everybody's lobbying.
Given
I
what's
wouldn't
going
hold
on
my
in
breath.
Congress, I think that's
Like,
unlikely.
They don't even have, speaking, like, Congress doesn't really technically like exist right now.
I think we can turn this one around.
Careful.
Just think that what we do on LIWAP doesn't make, it's not gonna make or break whether LIWAP happens. We should
National
put our,
associations are doing that.
everybody's lobbying on it, and it's either gonna happen or it's not gonna happen, but we shouldn't put our eggs in that basket. Cause I think it's very long odds that it gets any money in the near to,
Given where Congress is now, I think it's.
I mean, they're slashing funding like across the board.
There could be a state LIWAP if there were any.
There could be a state LIWAP.
Michigan program.
Yeah.
But then, but yeah,
Yeah, that could be
part of lobbying.
LIWAP I put in the same category as like these like emergency assistance programs though, because it's like a one-off payment that you can get
Yeah.
if you apply. It's not like recurring assistance that people can come to count on. So it's in the same category as what we talked about for the water fund as potential use.
Is there,
Plus it doesn't exist.
sorry, is there a reason we wouldn't pursue all funding opportunities? Because I would imagine that at this point, since we don't know what we want to do, yet, that
We're
more is
kind of,
better,
we're
right?
kind of down to like 3.
Yeah, I think.
And
that-
weren't we got, supposed to vote on
I
3
think I heard-
options?
I think I heard this.
Right,
go
getting
on.
turned around.
Yeah.
So there's not really voting. I mean, we're,
Well,
We were going
Becky,
to-
let's continue where you're headed, because I'm beginning to see 3 myself.
Right, like we got the voluntary contributions that match up with the water fund, which we're thinking of now as potential like emergency assistance fund for people. And then,
Those here,
right, so those go together.
yeah,
Then city funding as funding stream for a city funded and operated cap, which seems like the most plausible path forward for a real robust program in the near term. And then a more medium to long term would be getting the state law changed so that we could potentially consider operating our own program, whether that's an income-based rate program or a rate-funded cap.
Kind of,
I mean, they're both rate-funded programs.
the late fee and the payment plan are already.
So those two are those are orphaned over there, so.
Well, they're kind of already happening, I thought.
They are. I think our intent, we put that up there, our intent was to bring our payment plans back into 12 months moving forward. If we're signing up for new payment plans, once we hit the new bill. So I think the question is do we want to leave the payment plans at 48 months? Because that's where they are at the moment.
But that's for the delinquencies, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So I'm sort of seeing them 2 separate things, right? Like the payment plans for delinquencies at 4 years, because some of them are probably pretty high. That makes some sense. But moving forward, the 12 months sort of makes sense for people that aren't delinquent.
Is everybody eligible for a payment plan? So could there be a hardship that would extend the 12 months to more?
I think if you're already on a payment plan that you signed up, it's 48 months, if that's what you signed up for.
yeah, we can't shrink.
You can't change that. So
right,
without the
existing.
intent to change payment plans, but
Moving forward.
moving forward, the intent would be stop offering 48-month payment plans, offer 12-month payment plans, or keep them at 48 months. That's the question, kind of.
Just assume that we would basically reinstitute the cutoff subject to somebody putting in a payment plan and being consistent with that
60,
payment
yeah.
plan.
That would be the
That's
idea.
that's 3/4 of the reason our numbers have gone up is because, we're the only utility that doesn't cut off.
Yeah.
Mr. Beal wants to say something?
Couldn't your payment plan be based, the length of it be based on how much someone owes? That if you owe $500, it's fairly reasonable to pay that off in a year. If someone hasn't paid in several years, that it's gonna be a real hardship to pay it off in 12 months.
That rewarding the ones that haven't paid in a long, long time.
Well, it's just reality, I guess. I mean, if you're in that deep of a hole,
I mean, some are
are you gonna be
municipal,
able to pay it off in 12 months?
commercial customers have pretty decent sized bills.
Sure,
Commercial's like a whole nother
Oh.
thing, I think.
Are
We've been
you
talking
including
about
the
residential.
rentals in the commercial though? Because that's a problem. Like if some of our commercials are those big rental properties and we force them to pay in
Oh.
12 months, that trickles down
That's
to
right,
residents, right? But if we're talking about commercial businesses that are not residential, that's different. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I think the question is, our plan was to go back to 12-month payment plans moving forward, post-COVID. We do have the ability to structure them any way we want, so that's why that was up there as an option. We have the ability to change our payment plan.
So I
Change
guess.
the late fees.
Maybe I'm thinking about this incorrectly. So I'm thinking about the delinquencies as that big chunk, really heavy, like those are the people that are in the hole. like the 4-year plan makes sense to me in some cases, right? But if you're getting on a payment plan because you're having trouble paying your bill and it's not necessarily delinquent and you know that, then the 12 months sort of makes sense to me. Like I'm thinking of them separately, but you're obviously not. So am I missing something or?
No.
Okay.
Why?
Well, no, because
Different.
I guess I was thinking of them separately and I wasn't sure if that was the question.
I think the question was for the board, do we want to do anything different with our existing payment plans to adjust them in a way to help with affordability? Because right now our affordability program is, we have these big, long payment plans and we're not doing shut-offs. So our affordability program is,
Right.
that's what we've got right now. And should there be any changes to that? Do we want to continue to do the long payment plans? I guess that was more of a question for the board for discussion.
I think I don't know how many people who are delinquent but not in a payment plan yet.
A lot.
A lot. So
There's like
that's the
90
bulk.
people.
That's the bulk of it. So we may have some people who aren't in a payment plan who owe large amounts of money.
Most are not in payment.
Have we started shut-offs yet?
We haven't transitioned to the new customer care.
When do we think we're going to? Because that's going to probably make huge difference. And then,
Customer care transition will be the first 2 weeks in November. And then we were not going to do shut-offs until probably after the holiday, January, February.
Mhm.
And that's starting the process where you're sending a letter again and give it 60 days.
to the spring.
And then we're doing the calls and most likely this spring.
So that's when you're going to see a big uptick in requests for payment plans. So
Potentially.
knowing what the term should be is,
Potentially.
I like Jim's idea of depending on the amount.
without consideration to income.
Some special customer.
I mean, it's hard to imagine being able to, anybody really being able to pay like a 5-figure bill often a year.
Is there a way to structure it so that the length, there's like a formula that you can plug into the customers, like how much debt they owe, what their income is, and try to figure out like what's a reasonable amount for them to have to pay every month, and then that dictates the length of the plan in a administrable way. Like there's a set formula, you just plug the numbers in and it recommends like this person's plan should be 18 months or something. Is that a thing?
Yeah, we just don't have income data for customers.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
challenge.
Yeah, that's true.
That'd be self-reported.
They'd have to-
documented and
Right.
Otherwise, our graph from the last meeting wouldn't look a lot
Right,
better.
that's true, that's true. It
But
seems
yeah.
like in a perfect world, that would be the way to do it,
Agreed.
but yeah.
Without that information.
I think we can look at some ideas on structure around the
And
amount,
And maybe see what other utilities.
commercial versus
Right.
Maybe create if somebody's not delinquent now, they're in the
12 months.
12 month, kind of, so we're not growing our existing problem pool. And you're figuring a way to get that problem pool, get those numbers down. But it's Jim's idea of saying if it's a larger amount, then we give you a little longer to pay. If it's a smaller amount. And then there may be circumstances where somebody has a compelling story that it just be the judgment of
Discretion.
the person who's handling them at the counter to kind of make a decision. I mean, frankly, on some city tax cases, particularly personal property, I mean, if you say you'll haul somebody's car and I say, look, that's the only way I can get to work, the only way I can pay the bill. And you're saying, no, we're not going to put the car in take. You make individual decisions and there's a little bit of trust that at least the story at that point in time they're telling you is true, and then you make a decision that way that's a little bit more ad hoc in giving maybe a little room to somebody who's got a more severe problem or presents they have more severe problem.
One thing that keeps kind of coming back, I keep coming back to is the data that you all presented about how often people fall off their payment plans. It seems like that happens a lot. And it would be helpful to know why that is. Is it because even on the payment plan, the payments are too high for people to manage? Like,
I think it's
Or
a lack
is
of
it-
shut-offs.
so do you think that's just because there's no incentive to keep paying rather than the amount?
And I think that'll change when start shutting off.
If I may, when I was at Prince William County, the trend was very common. When you're on a payment plan with no consequences or no shut-offs, you see a lot of people default on their payment plan.
Because potentially one of your other payment plans is
Has
very
a consequence.
consequent, and so.
Yeah.
We tried to get data out of Virginia American to find out if the same customers that we have are also at risk of shut off through VAW, and we didn't get an answer. We pushed, but we might have a maybe legal memo that we send to them to get the data.
What sort of discretion exists within the shut off policy when you're deciding whether to shut off someone's water? Like if it's someone who's truly like extremely low income and like truly cannot afford to pay, do they still get their water shut off? Is there any opportunity to or is it very just like?
I think if you go into a payment plan, we don't shut their water off.
So when they call, then that's what you
Yeah.
do is get them.
So there's two things that would prohibit a shut off. One is a medical condition. And the second would be if you're on a payment plan. If you're on an active payment plan and you're keeping up with your payments, you're not going to get shut off. So I think that's the net to catch somebody who, and then we could work with that customer to be able to work up a payment
Then
plan
the plan
that's
has to be
flexible.
really fair. Because losing access to water is such a severe
Right.
burden on
Yeah.
people. It should be something that is only done if there's like no other option. So just, that goes back to the importance of structuring the payment plan differently.
And I think there's the way the process for shut-offs work is we don't go out and just shut off water. The approach is there's typically a letter, and then that's 60 days, and then a door hanger. I think we're gonna supplement now that we've got the phone numbers, we have phone calls we wanna make, we have emails now we can send. The door hangers that we put out recently didn't have much of an impact at all, even though it said you could be at risk of being shut off. We did not have a big impact with that. So again, it's a lengthy process to even get to the ability to shut off. Then we have to have Virginia American Water go out and actually do it. So it is like a 3-month process.
Does the door hanger say you will be shut off by X date? No, not yet, because we can't shut off.
The old ones did.
Yeah.
The ones that we just put out, this past summer did not, because we
Yes, we
couldn't
know.
put a
Yeah.
date in there.
Do
And
you think
that
that'll make a difference?
goes back to Lake's point of that. I think some customers know that we don't have shut offs at the moment. And that is our only ability right now to recover those delinquencies, with the exception of doing a lien, but we've kind of gone down that path too. So it doesn't address the problem.
Can you talk a little bit about the late fees, what you were thinking there? Is it just yes or no, charge them or not charge them?
Yeah. We're waiving late fees right now. It just wanted to be captured as an enhancement to what we do already. So.
Sorry, John, I interrupted you.
No, this is great dialogue. So right now, for payment plans, it's 48 months currently.
If that's what the customer signed up for, it was allowed to go up to
Yeah.
48 months. Not everybody elected to do that, but that was the max.
But henceforth, it's 12.
I think what I heard tonight, it is, let's look at the value, and what we're going to do is, for a residential customer, we would structure that around the amount due that's reasonable to pay off over time. Commercial customers, I think we have to continue to work with commercial customers.
Do you want to get back, staff want to get back to us with their proposal? on
I
this?
think what we would do is based on the discussion,
Based
let's
on
put
this
together a little
discussion,
table
Yeah,
Okay,
and bring it back to.
great.
because I think you need to put pencil to paper and.
Yeah.
And that's a complicated one. It's
Yeah.
a complicated thing,
Well, I think we can go through the table,
Okay.
take a look, draw some lines.
but okay, so that's a work in progress. That's you've got. You're gonna do that, yeah. So are we converging on sort of these three options?
It feels like we are, and it feels like they're kind of like sequential in a nice way. It's like it really kind of, they work
Flows.
together, it
It
flows.
As our product flows, yes. Um,
Ours flows downhill.
and these things are, actually, they're kind of embedded in that last.
Maybe embedded in the.
As just, yeah, things that are kind of more distant options.
So are we really saying 1, 2, 3?
These parallel.
Well, I think one and
think they're
two
parallel.
can start
Like
now.
now.
And then three, I think the looking into the legal interpretation can also be happening now, but the lobbying would hold off until the next session because we're focused on the river renew deadline. Is that right?
Yeah. And laying the groundwork with those associations.
Talking
having the
to-
conversations.
Right, I think we can get on the agenda to have this discussion at your next VWWA meeting and
Okay.
maybe do some discussions ahead of time too with some of the other leaders.
On the city funded program, I mean, I don't think it's too soon to set up like a initial conversation with the city. Right? I mean, just to kind of like broach the idea.
We have entree.
I think I'd frame it as we have interest in, our rates have been going up. We got the River Renew project, which we took over from the city. And it's in our rates, and we're interested in kind of how do we address the issue. We don't, it appears we don't have, it's clear we don't have the legal authority. It appears we don't have the legal authority. We're working on that. And there are two things. One is, we try to design a program. And then if we see either city has an option of paying for it, or we might have an option of paying for it if we're successful on the lobbying front. So I would say approaching the city with, let's design a program, figure out the needs.
Yeah, data.
Design a program, and we can deal with the issue of who pays for it or combinate, maybe it's a combo. Clearly, as Jim has mentioned, we got the city's sewer rate. That's part of this, so they're so I think they do whatever we come up with, they go along with at least that part of it for sure.
And getting the data from them
So I
as
think we
an
don't
early
lead,
step.
we want your money.
Yeah,
Well,
that's not-
do what? I think if you lead with, we have a need, we need to figure it out, and then we can get to how it's paid for, and we're working on one round.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It would be far better received.
Yes.
I want your money is never a good home.
I didn't say that's what we're gonna start with.
No, nobody did.
Just to convene a conversation.
Yeah, no, I, to be honest with you, it's, nobody pays their sewer bill in isolation. They pay their stormwater fee, their Virginia American fee, utilities. Okay, so it sounds like a consensus of the group, and correct me if I'm wrong, is first two columns, we can start moving on. Third one, very carefully, in conjunction with other authorities through lobbying organizations. And staff will get back to us with a payment plan proposal. How's that for consensus?
We didn't use the stickies.
We need it.
Are you disappointed? Should we go up and just? I'll call my way out.
No, but
That's my
let's,
sense of humor.
does this capture the mood of the group?
Yeah, this was a great conversation.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Beal?
yes,
Now, Mr. Carl, does this burden staff in any exorbitant way?
No.
This is all doable
Yes.
while doing all the other things we're doing, which are numerous and manyfold. Okay. Good. By the way, this is exactly how our committee should be formed, and a lot of good discussion. Everybody contributes. This is good. Great. And we're back here tomorrow.
Ooh,
I think, do we like this room setup for the board meeting?
this is nice. Yeah, I like being able to like see.
Except for being on this side.
Well, it's fine. I got used to
Yeah.
it. That's fine.
it looks like you were gonna have Ms. Hammer and me on one side and the rest of the group on the other, and that just seems, I'd like to set up with everyone on one side, but it's, the other disadvantage is that if you're sitting on, Justin's right, you can't see who's behind you. I don't know if that's an advantage or disadvantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody sitting over there can't see.
Wait, when we're all in a line also, we can't see each other very well.
Yeah, this is.
Like, cause I'm on the end.
More people.
And I've always felt the distance between staff and the board.
Really
It really needs to
excessive.
be
This is
Yeah.
good.
closer.
By the way,
It can still be
There are more
fine.
people in the
More
room
seats.
for the board
Yeah.
meeting now.
I
I
was
never
wishing
seen
to put the chair at the head of the table, maybe the five
We
members
could have the
this way.
5 of us like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
here.
Staff and sit.
Right, well, now we're just rearranging the furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
It might
sense.
be fun.
Rearranging the deck chairs?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a C.
Yeah.
Like a C. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so everybody can see everybody else.
It's amazing how a
Like
different
this.
configuration actually spurs more
More
We
conversation.
can actually hear each other too.
I do like being closer together though, although I wasn't prepared for it. I walked by and I'm like, where am I?
The room does look empty from the door.
Okay.
Okay.
Also, this committee meets on November 13th. So we'll get a draft of the audit. So we're all on schedule. Good. That's good to hear. Hey, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Sorry, I forgot that I was the only one.
Have a good evening.
And I'm like,
Thank you.
am I the only one doing it?
I have it on the agenda for Monday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do this.
Well done. This is exactly, this came up in a good place.
But we can
Yeah.
we need to start sound.
Thank you. The whole.
Thank you.
Are there numbers on this?
No, just everybody has their own
I
color.
voted, yeah.
We had stickies.
Yeah, you all had your own colors.
Thank you.
Where are we off?
Justin,
Yes.
quick question.
Tired.
A while back, you or somebody on staff, well, some did these amazing videos about flooding, like the flooding. Yeah. Did you guys do that in-house or did you have a marketing?
We do that. Recorded it in. And then we actually had a consultant that had the ability to do it, put together.
Although
the 3D.
going-
Wasn't a marketing firm, it's actually.
Yeah.
Frank Oliver company.
Oh, cool.
No,
Had a
let
guy-
me put on my.
Okay, thank you. We can do same time if it